back to the Nonprofit Renaissance Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Colin. Today, we're going to dive into an inspiring conversation with Jeff Sullivan. Jeff is the executive pastor at Granada Church, as well as a military chaplain. And so we're going to explore Jeff's journey from church planning to serving as a chaplain, and we're going to discuss the unique challenges and rewards of these roles. You're going to hear how Jeff's experiences can help you expand your leadership and your impact in the nonprofit world. So let's go and let's grow.
Hanging out in the 305.
Yeah.
There's a list of accolades that I can list. I'll list some of them because you're from sitting on the board of CARE, large organization, from executive pastor, an amazing church in Miami, Granada Church, to chaplain for the police department, for the Army currently, and tons more I can say. But the most important is you were, when I was a teenager, you were one of my pastors.
Way back, right?
And that just makes either you old or me, I don't know, crazy, because we talked about this, but way back in the day, and early ministry days, you were doing it. You were pastoring, you were church planning, you were, is that right?
That seems like a different lifetime ago, doesn't it?
It does.
Out in West Kendall.
And now you did you parachute into Miami? No.
Well, no, I came and married a Cuban. So
Okay,
is that parachuting or would that be
sailing into Miami?
I think I'm an illegal alien to Miami. I crossed the border. So
you can, okay, yeah. That's different than parachuting in.
Right.
Once you're into the Cuban, you got into the Cuban mafia from the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, I got in. I bought in. I came in to be Cuban and then I started church.
I love it.
So that's kind of the way it played out.
All to say to our listeners, Jeff and I go way back, and you're listening from Jeff Sullivan, and currently XP at Granada Church, an incredible place here in Miami. If you're in the area, if you're looking for a place, incredible people, you need to stop by. In our team has been in partnership and working in lots of overlap in family and friends who are here. But it's exciting because today we're talking specifically about something kind of dear to his heart, and something that I've explored as well, that I have family who are exploring, are in the service per se, but that's chaplaincy in general. So tell us a little bit first, your journey into that, and pastoring and now chaplaincy, and doing both and how that works.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've only been a chaplain for 2 years, and I'm 47 now. So I got started at the age of 45, which is pretty late for military careers. Typically, you start young. That way you can be young and fit and do all the stuff you're supposed to do. But
which I want to talk, that's a great misconception even to start with, because most people assume you may have to start in your 20s maybe, or in your 30s?
Well,
not necessarily.
Yeah,
for chaplaincy.
I would guess probably 30s would be ideal because then you can't start with so young, because it is a requirement for military chaplains to have a master's of divinity. So you figure if you've got 4 years of school plus 3 years of school, you're looking at 7. The earliest you could be is probably like 25, and then they need 2 years experience. So if you just had it as a dream right out of high school to do it, you still wouldn't do it for 10 years. So, so there is some, part of that just is already going to make you a little bit older in it. But I think there's an advantage to being older in the chaplaincy, because there is a level of life experience, So like I have a son who is 23 years old.
Wow.
The soldiers that I'm talking to are that age, some even younger.
That's great.
So it allows you to have more of a father figure, have a little more wisdom to share, life experience, understanding of what's important, not than when you're younger. Like even myself at 30 is not going to see the world the way I do at 47. It's just you just understand life differently at that point. So it does help being in there as you're older.
I love that. And I want to get into some details, because to our listeners, I asked Jeff to kind of put on the chaplain hat. There's so many things he's great at, and people he oversees, and how he pastors and leads. But I wanted to talk about this one because in talking to you, there's a need.
Right.
There's a need. Now, in chaplaincy for the armed forces, for the military, also maybe for your local police department, or there's hospitals. The need for good chaplaincy and good
Mhm.
care in that sense. How did you kind of come into it and break it down a little bit? What does a chaplain do?
Oh, so I would say if I let's say I was talking to someone that I want to encourage you to be a chaplain, or maybe you're thinking about should I be a chaplain? So first, it's a new opportunity to serve. If you're service minded, that it's kind of built into your DNA, or you're part of ministry that you'll have opportunities to serve people. You like to be in that spot when things are rough. That you're like, I like to be the person people talk to. I like the one who brings hope. If you're that kind of person, then chaplaincy is just an ideal role for you, because the most crucial moments of chaplaincy are when things are difficult.
Hmm.
A couple recent examples that I could share. So I'm a volunteer at the Coral Gables Police Department as a chaplain, because their chaplaincy program is not paid. It's all volunteer based. And there's a few other pastors and a Catholic priest and a rabbi. We're on a team together to serve the local police department here.
Is that standard, Jeff? The volunteer forces, or is
It varies. It depends. So maybe if you're like Miami-Dade County has paid chaplains and volunteer chaplains.
gotcha?
Broward Sheriff's Department has a great chaplain team. So it's really dependent on how that department operates. So many of them are volunteer based on just budgetary, but you might be living in a county or municipality that they've already budgeted to have a chaplain, and so that would be a paid position. And it's worth a paid position because there is so much a chaplain can do.
Hmm.
And then I think on a volunteer level, it comes to be where your chaplain does what's needed to be done. So there's a lot of room for, possibility when someone's full time. But a great value, I think, in let's just speak as from my experience as a volunteer police chaplain, you have to understand the police department, to me, is a higher risk organization than the military. Because as a military chaplain, the armed forces go somewhere and fight an enemy somewhere else and then come home. The police department, their battle is in their own neighborhood.
Their backyard.
And
Yep.
and there's a high tension because most stops and interactions are fine, but you don't know which one's going to not be the one. You don't know which one is the one that is risky or dangerous or is going to be very hostile. And it could be as much as what would normally be a sweet old lady in the neighborhood could be just chewing out because they feel like they have the ability to yell and scream, or it could be, real life-threatening danger. So there's an on edge in the police department, and then there's not a separation because you drive home. You're driving home a few miles. You're not deploying and leaving it and saying, "Woof, that place, that part of the world's terrible. I'm glad I'm not there anymore." You're just there, and you'll go back in 8 hours, or you'll go back in 10 hours. So there's a much more difficult aspect of separating the tension, the stress, the danger, and that's why it is such a very difficult job. That's why, police work is very hard, not just the life-threatening part, because there's that risk, but, most officers, aren't going to have shots fired at them or have to shoot. That's not a constant thing, but it is a constant stress, emotional, it's constant conflict happening with whoever you pull over. It's so managing that on a day-to-day is difficult. And then you see the worst of everything in your neighborhood. So when the police are called, it's because something terrible. So you don't see the best of things. You see the worst of things, and it colors your world. So police officers really need chaplains to bring hope, to be a confidential listener, to be an encourager, to be on their team, to know that there's a place to be. And I would definitely encourage, if you are a pastor, wherever you're hearing this, check in and see what is the situation like at your police department. Do they have a volunteer police chaplaincy? Are they looking for more? You know, at first, if they don't know you and you don't know them, just like anybody else, if you show up at my door, I'm not giving you a job. But
Correct.
but if you know, oh, okay, there is a need, let me start to lay some groundwork to prepare for that. For me, it was volunteering on committees. So if I spent time on different committees, like anti-crime or neighborhood watch, stuff like that, then you establish to the police that you are a citizen who cares and that you're a pastor who would be available. And then from there, then you have enough trust that they invite you into it. If it's not like a open position you apply for, a lot of times it's relational. But I think every church should look at its community and say, is this something that we could be doing?
I love that. Jeff, you've done it bivocationally in the sense that you've maintained full-time ministry, always serving the local church, involved. How is that possible? How would you encourage someone who's on a staff at a church or someone who needs to look in? So it's not a conflict, or wait, is there different career pursuits or a calling? Talk to me about that. How have you managed it? How to encourage others to look at it for police, but also for military?
I would say a lot of that has to do with how the church, what expectations the church has for its pastor. I'm very thankful at Granada. There is a very openness here to allow pastors to find ways to be ministers in the community and not just be pastors at the church, And so having that type of margin in your staff is good, so that, like, for me, that becomes a whole new outlet of ministry that doesn't always translate directly to church attendance or, things like that. But it does create a high level of goodwill of my church in the community. So now all the police officers know the pastor at that church volunteers his time for them. Same for my city commissioners know that that's the case. So when you talk about that civic local government, which is very important to the local church, how you are serving your local community, that shows that we're invested in them. So even if you can't quantify it with, some of the things that pastors count for church growth, it does go a long way in community involvement and opportunity. On the military side, there's a couple advantages this could be for a church staff. For one, for me personally, I didn't realize to what level it would expand my own leadership and communication and pastoral care. Some of it, when you're in the Army Reserve is training. Now, a lot of it's sitting around at PowerPoint. If you talk to anyone in the military, it's death by PowerPoint, something they'll say that, So when you're experiencing that, you're like, well, this isn't really teaching me in such a way that's going to make me a better person. But the way it does is, as a pastor, for many years, I was always surrounded by church people, and then, as growing up, you have seminary, you have your MDiv. So like you insulate yourself from the world at such a high level that you're only used to talking to Christians or people who are already walking in the room exploring Christianity. When you're a chaplain and you're placed in the general population of the U.S. military, even though a heavy percent of that does check the box Christian as opposed to other religions,
it's a little different.
Right. They're not going to church. They don't know their pastor's name. They don't have,
Yeah.
And so now you're having
now you're in the world, not of the world, but you're in the world.
Exactly.
You're hearing it, feeling it, seeing it. You're having the locker room talk / water cooler talk / I'm sure you've heard everything in between.
Well, then you end up having to really start to speak differently, because you can't just say, well, the Bible says this blank, and this verse this, and this, because now you have to talk to someone who's not using the Bible as their primary reference point.
Yeah.
So it teaches a level of apologetics.
I love that.
But not a debate apologetics, or not in my case. I would hope other chaplains the same. You don't go to the debate people because it doesn't really do that, but you start to learn how they're thinking and how you can express the gospel in ways that match what they're looking for and how to serve.
Or strategy in a rational way to explain something that to us is, right, put into Christianese.
Right.
We understand it, and it's I I love that. I love that. Now, with that said, obviously, Jeff, Christian evangelical pastor, some taboos here with chaplaincy.
Hmm.
All are welcome, all are open. Now,
Right.
there's some, there's again, even I guess laws and legalities here. All religions welcome to become a chaplain?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Tell me about that. Is there any conflict there? Is that good, bad, ugly? How's that handled? Because a Buddhist
Mhm.
or a priest is going to maybe handle things different than a,
Right.
you name it, Pentecostal, Presbyterian, or
Mhm.
pastor.
Yeah. So my only experience is the Army Reserve, and which is an excellent chaplaincy program. So it is interfaith. So in the Army Reserve, you will have predominantly, though, you're going to have Protestant Christian, which is the huge majority of the population, as well as the chaplains. Then you will have a small population of Roman Catholic. You'll have a very small minority of rabbi or imam, and then you'll have an occasional other, whether that might be Hindu, Buddhist, Sikh, anything outside of those normal, what we expect in the normal population.
Gotcha.
So those kind of outliers. So it is still predominantly a Christian thing, but you do have to have the flexibility to work with others. So if you're very rigid about your doctrine, you're going to have a hard time serving alongside of other people. You do have to realize that, hey, I'm working in a situation that's outside of my church, so I have to be willing to play fair in the sandbox with others, that it's not my place. At my church, I can say this is what we say, what we do, because any of you come in, you've already agreed to that because you're saying, I'm coming into your church.
My house, my rules, right? Yeah.
Right. If I'm coming into the Army, that's not my place. I am in this place that is not a religious setting, and so I'm bringing it in, but I have to realize there's other people in the room that I have to be, play fair with. Now, one good thing, even in the Army Code of Doctrine, is that as so a chaplain is endorsed by a certain denomination. So the
Gotcha.
Army partners with the denominations.
Which is part of a requirement, correct?
Correct.
There's
right?
DMDiv at all levels, even for police?
Police is different. Police is different. They departments are able to set their own rules.
Gotcha. So a ministry, even a bachelor's or a Bible degree, or even experience in ministry over a period of time,
It's
possibly?
whatever that chief of police wants. If
Perfect.
he just thinks you're a cool guy and you do a good job, there's no rules to them.
So maybe even Colin, our co-host here, Colin, you may qualify, Colin. I know you're listening right now. You couldn't be in Miami with us, but I know you're going to take a break right now and defend yourself right now. But I think you're cool enough, man. I think you may do it.
He could do it.
He could do it, right?
Well, if the chief likes him, who knows?
We'll see.
But in the Army, there's a partnership. So you have your endorser, which is your denomination. So whether you're Presbyterian, Baptist, Assemblies of God, Catholic, whatever, that your denomination will validate you, say this is a qualified candidate of our faith, and then they'll recommend you to the Army, and then the Army will commission you. So you have two oversights. The Army has the general rule, and then you have your specific denominational. So the Army will never ask me to violate my denominational rules.
Gotcha.
So whatever those might be particularly, I do not have to violate my own faith to serve others.
Gotcha.
So with the way they describe it in there is that you either perform or provide. So I either perform the religious service for you or I provide it. So let's say you believe something different than me, then it's just my job as your chaplain to say, you know what, let me find a chaplain who believes what you believe, and I'll contact you to them. So that allows, I know a lot of people worry about some of the social changes,
How has that
happen.
Have you seen some of that? Has some of that happened socially?
Well, the general population has changed so much. So yeah. And the Army is just the general population. It's not different. It's the same as the general population you find, and it's just a cross-section of that in various ways. And so the beliefs will be very similar to what everyone else has.
What have you seen, Jeff, in a time of hurt, time of need? I think as creation, as humankind, there's a certain need and there's a certain void. What have you seen there? Because at those levels, have there been any obstacles? Are people open? Has it been a good witnessing or gospel opportunity? Like what are some of those stories or things you've heard? and experienced?
I would say this: almost no one, and no one by my experience, and
From what
probably almost no one will reject you saying, "Can I pray for you?"
Mm.
So simply pray for people. If they're going through a hard time, just say, "Hey, let's stop and pray for it right now." And I've always find overwhelming positive response to that. People say, "Oh, thank you, chaplain. I feel so much more at peace. I feel so much." Even just that moment, if you realize if you're just going to affirm someone through prayer and pray God's blessing them in their life and pray for the things that are bothering them, you're going to gain that relational equity, and you're going to invite Christ into that and presence into that moment.
Yeah.
And that's going to mean a lot to them. And then your example as a good Christian man or woman, people watch you. They want to know, does this person speak differently, look differently, act differently? Do they have other people's best interests in mind? Do they look like Christ in a way that they would see it? And then if you're doing those things, you've now earned the respect of your words. And so then your chapel service or your Bible study you give out or whatever, now people are receptive to it. So I would say what would be different in the general population now than maybe say when I was young is that people are very open, so they don't want something to be too closed off. So if you keep things open-ended or you focus on the positive, you have a much greater chance of working with them towards something, and you can bring them into a knowledge of Christ or bring them to a recognition of Christ. If you try to close off a lot of boundaries, people get anxious about that.
Mm.
They don't want to be kind of pinned into something. They want to be able to pick.
Mm.
And I know for a lot of people that's like, well, that's not the truth, and you're not. Well, you could still bring the truth in.
Absolutely.
You just gotta, I think, be more aware of what's going to gain ground with them, or what's going to end your conversation quicker.
That's good. That's good. Jeff, tell me, we like to talk at the podcast a lot about the wins, success, but also sometimes failures. And give us a time where, okay, this went south, this was difficult, you learned something, and give us a story of like, man, God did this, or God used me and the team for. Can you share an experience that comes to mind?
Sure. I can say one of the easy things to do in like a military chaplain role or even in a police chaplain role is like your desire to blend in and to be part of the group can be so much that you end up not being a chaplain anymore. You just want to be, one of them. And so you steer away from a little bit of boldness. You steer away from maybe being awkward and asking to pray. You steer away and you just want to kind of, not be a problem. And then you realize, well, you're there to be a chaplain. You're not there to be a officer or soldier. They have those and they have training for that. And that's what they do. And so a failure that I experience is I'll find myself realizing, oh, this entire event or this entire day, all I did was, try to not be weird or not be, abrasive. And then I ended up not being
So
a chaplain
you became
either.
a peer at their level where
Mhm.
you're coming in with a level, one spiritual authority, but authority for care and leadership and, right? Does a chaplain rank higher than a soldier? Does that play into any of this or no?
Chaplains have ranks. They're all officers.
They all officers.
They have rank, but really the rank really doesn't have anything to do. You don't give orders to anyone in your
Gotcha.
unit. You have like a chaplain assistant or two that you are responsible to, and you give orders to them. But like I don't technically ever order other soldiers to do or not do. I am a rank. I can, do that, and they can't, disrespect me in a certain way. But that's not, I don't have any,
Gotcha.
mission to be giving people charge over. And even within the chaplaincy, there's levels, but that's usually just for, I have a, someone, a major who I report to, and he is, my boss. He can oversee me, tell me what not to do, what to do. But
Gotcha.
so he outranks me and does that. But typically in the military, you don't call chaplains by their rank. You just call them chaplain.
Bingo.
So
Gotcha.
that's the goal, is that we'd have one job, and it's
chap.
not based on rank.
Tell me before a success story.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to go to boot camp? I'm sure that's everybody's question on the podcast. Do they make you do the everything?
There's an officers training, something called BOLIC, Basic Officer Leadership Course, that chaplains go through. Air Force, Navy, and Army, they do it differently. The Army, it's 13 weeks. It does include about 4 weeks of basic training type stuff, but it is not the same level as a soldier. Like the 18-year-old signing up
a 5-minute
with a drill
mile
sergeant.
or something crazy like that, or
No, you don't have to be in that great a shape. Unfortunately, the standard for
you're in shape, man. You're doing great. Are you doing like pull-ups every day and doing?
That's my choice to try to be at the top of the list, not the bottom of the list.
I love it.
But you can the minimum requirements for officers in the Army Reserve is pretty low. If you're not injured and you do your basic mobility, you'll be able to do it.
Gotcha.
You know, so it's not. And if you just put a little bit of effort, you'll get yourself there if you aren't there.
Sweet.
So that's not really a huge obstacle.
Cool story. Cool story.
Yeah.
Maybe God's done something you've experienced and seen God do through the chaplaincy.
Something I thought was so a powerful experience was the opportunity. We went into a situation that was very heavy. There was a loss of life, and we were kind of working through with different relationships, and I had the opportunity to have like a joint counseling session. It was a civilian who was a part of the staff there, and she had been a part of it a long time. It was myself as a chaplain, and it was one of the Army psychologists, because the Army does provide behavioral health. There is a whole behavioral health system with nurse practitioners, occupational therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, like all of that is in there, in the medical part of the Army. And we both had the opportunity to help a lady who had been close to a suicide situation. And this was an interesting dynamic, because typically a chaplain or a psychologist would work separately, not together. And this just kind of like happened in the situation that it was. And neither one of us had ever done this together.
Wow.
And so we were both like curious, like, well, how's this going to go? Especially since he's atheist, and
Wow.
he and I know that we're in the same unit together. We're friends. He's a very respectful person. He's a great person. And that's the faith choice that he's made at this time. And so, we were there, and so we were going to serve together through this. And so, he did a great job of what he does. A therapist asks the right questions, validates, directs, all that good stuff. And then, it's my turn as a chaplain to kind of wrap it up. And, and so I did what a chaplain does, just affirmed and spoke to her. And then in the end, I asked her, hey, can I pray for you? And she says, yeah. And so I just prayed for her, just pray a blessing over someone, and just the way that you would as a pastor.
Did the atheist pray with you?
See, and so that's the thing. Later he comes, because this was the cool part. That's why I have a lot of respect for him, because he doesn't have to say any of this, but he does. He comes back later and he says, I didn't know what that was going to be like, because I'd never worked with a chaplain at the same time. And then he says that when you said, can I pray for you? He was like, should I get up and leave? And he's like, no, that would look really weird if I left for this. So let me just stay, So he stays.
I love it.
And he bows his head like the rest of us, and, looks
He's
as part of the team.
Yeah,
He's
respectful.
a respectful person. And then he says, but you know what? He's like, I felt peace when you prayed for her. And so one of the other soldiers like, well, you mean you felt like she had some peace? He's like, no, I felt peaceful. It's like, I understood why there's chaplains. And
oh, that's cool.
He says, you didn't convert me, but I see what you do, and I'm thankful for what you do, and I appreciated it. And I told him, like, man, I appreciate that you would say that, and that you would,
that's cool.
Be vulnerable like that and talk about it. And, then I ask him, like, how did I do? Because sometimes pastors like to give answers and not ask questions when people talk. And, so he validated some of the work I was doing.
That's great.
So that's the thing. When you're present in those situations, now there's a bridge he and I have, and who knows how God will use that.
Absolutely.
I have no idea how God's going to reveal to him.
Right. God's at work, obviously, in us first.
Yeah.
But the 360, right? The person you're ministering to, but those all around, and you never know. I love that. I love hearing that.
Yeah. It was very validating for me to this is why I'm a chaplain. This is great.
I love that. That's encouraging.
Yeah.
I love it because, in your role as an executive and sitting on boards, there's an administrative, executive leadership kind of piece, which I'm sure this this allows you to kind of have this different expression in shepherding, in listening,
Exactly.
caring, which is and it's an outreach. It's not self-serving or internal in a sense that you're not just, well, it's this organization that's paying me. No, it's out. So it's thanks for doing that. Thanks for inspiring. I think in the conversations we've had, it's motivated, inspired.
Yeah.
Our team, some of the folks who are listening. Tell me this to the next generation
Sure.
of chaplains and the future, and us caring for them, and from locally in our departments, with the sheriff or overseas who get deployed active, not just reserve. What's a word of advice, encouragement, and hope to them?
Yeah. For one, to those who aren't yet in it, I would say chaplaincy is a great opportunity. It's actually a growing ministry. Yeah, I mean, you could call it also a growing job field that, whether it's a military chaplain or law enforcement chaplain, they now have
Marketplace,
marketplace chaplains. Large corporations are hiring chaplains, and there's a lot of great organizations that will bring you on as a chaplain team especially if you live in a metropolitan area, and then they'll assign you to different places. Hospital chaplains, like, it's actually its own professional field. So if you are a person who wants to be in ministry, but maybe you're not able to have a full-time position as a pastor at a church, that is a beautiful opportunity to do something bivocational, or to have all of your income come through chaplaincy and then serve in a church. Also, I see that as opportunity, maybe if you're listening and you're like in a smaller church, and like healthcare costs are ridiculous for staff. And so, like you say, man, we had like $50,000-$60,000 to pay a youth pastor or a part-time pastor, but we can't give their family insurance because that's another $30,000-$25,000. Well, if you're willing to share your time with them, and if they are, one of these government agencies, then they're going to get healthcare at a much discounted rate, and then you can still have them on staff. But then they have this new world of opportunity outside the church and in the church, but you can take care of people in a better way. So,
love that.
It creates more flexibility if your organization, if your church is willing to share the person. Because obviously as a reserve chaplain, you're gone one Sunday a month, and then you have trainings and you have a risk of deployment. But all your other time you're there, and you can really grow from that. Your question was, what would I say to, some lasting advice to a chaplain?
Yeah, the chaplain in the future, the young ones, those entering. And I think I love that, even some of those practical, tactical, but, even fiscal and financial kind of benefits that could come along, could benefit a nonprofit, could benefit a church, and personally, families that are seeking opportunities to stay in their gift lanes, to stay in their strength. So that's fantastic. Any more perks like that? Like, play. I know you're not a recruiter for them. Maybe not yet. Maybe after this podcast.
No, I don't mind recruiting. I think it's a great thing.
What others? Throw down like the list of like
some benefits to being a military. I mean, obviously there's like healthcare is one of the better. The money's not going to be great. It's it's a fixed amount. It's good. It's supplemental, but your healthcare,
reserve or active?
Reserve.
This is reserve, right?
Probably active too, depending on how much money you need to make where you live. So cash usually isn't it, but there's the private sector always gives discounts. There's a lot of those different. If you're able to go and do the retirement levels, you can do stuff like that. Those are good things.
Did they pay for the education? How does that work?
They can. There's different variations on that. They don't typically, as a chaplain, they don't pay your education because you can't become one until you have your MDiv. That means you've already paid for it. So now, if you were doing a degree after, there's some things.
Gotcha.
You also you're able to pass on. So, if you did qualify at a certain point for like GI Bill or stuff like that, you can pass it on to another family member. So you can end up having like your own son go or your own daughter go because you didn't need it because you had already done all the schooling when you entered. So there's a lot of little benefits that come along like that. There's also great trainings. Like they'll train you on depending on what you're able for, different things from marriage and family to suicide prevention to leadership development. You can hospital chaplaincy. So if you get into those programs, they pay you, they put you on orders, so you get paid to get trained, and then you come out with actual certifications that you can use to have chaplaincy careers in the VA and other hospital settings. So depending on what you're looking to do, you can benefit that way.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Plus, you get a cool uniform, I'm assuming?
It's great to play dress up. Then you have something for Halloween. You have something, all kinds of good stuff,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing. We'll put some links out here on tools and opportunities for you to look into this. If it's something that strikes a chord, if you want to reach out to Jeff and talk to him, again, he's doing this out of the willingness and kindness of his heart and his passion to serve others, to serve community, but serve our nation, and with the gospel and with care and the way Jesus would do it. So I appreciate you sharing. Any final thoughts? Any final words before we hand it off to Colin here?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, as you notice that, I know statistically we all recognize that the rise of the nuns, the people who aren't going to church, the people who don't believe, what I'm discovering and what you see in real life and what you can see in studies is it's not that those nuns are against hearing the gospel or hearing about Christ. And so it's just there's a great opportunity to go outside the church and share the gospel. They're mostly people who are afraid of institutions. They've, whether by experience or by exposure, feel like the church is hypocritical or there's corruption, all those different things. What you realize is when you get into one-on-one conversations, you're really able to break through that if you have like the heart of the gospel and you share what it's about and you share it with a genuineness. There is a great openness in the next generation for an authentic gospel. And so chaplaincy puts you in that space and gives you that opportunity.
I love it. I love it. It is missional. It is missional at its best. You don't have to leave the country even to be intentionally missional. I love it. Jeff, thanks again for what you're doing.
Thank you, Heredes.
Thank you.
You do awesome stuff. I enjoy it.
We love it. Love, partnering and the ministry we get to do together when we serve together.
Thanks again for listening to the Nonprofit Renaissance. We hope it ignites a renaissance in you and helps you go further and grow faster. Be sure to share, rate, and subscribe. And if you'd like to recommend or be a guest on our show, send us an email at podcast@verseCreative.com.